Imagine this. At 30,000 feet, in the most luxurious cabin of the sky, a woman unfolds a napkin only to find mold growing on her first-class meal. The crew smirks. The captain threatens to divert the entire plane and whispers echo, "You don't belong here." What no one knew. She wasn't just a passenger, she was part owner of the airline. And every cruel word was being recorded. This is the story of how one flight turned into a reckoning that shook an entire company. Before we dive in, let me know where in the world you're watching from, and if you love stories that uncover truth and justice, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next one. Elena Torres stepped onto the jet bridge, the metallic chill of Heathrow clinging faintly to her coat sleeve. She kept her pace steady, neither rushing nor dragging, as if the entire world moved according to her schedule. Beneath the calm exterior, her body ached from 3 straight days of negotiations in London's chandelier-lit halls, where every smile was just another layer of calculation. Row 4C, business class. The seat had been booked weeks ago, with precise instructions: Mediterranean vegetarian meal, a glass of Merlot, and a quiet space where she could edit the final report for the board in New York. Around her, other passengers settled in. The snap of seatbelts, the rustle of newspapers, the faint tang of expensive perfume, mixing with the scent of leather upholstery, all the small sounds of an upper-class flight. Elena set her brown leather bag on the seat beside her and pulled out a thin notebook. She didn't write anything. She simply opened it, pen poised, the way some people carry a rosary. A reminder. Every detail, no matter how small, was worth recording. A tall figure moved down the aisle. Peter Lang, lead flight attendant, blonde hair slicked to a shine, a half-smile plastered on his sharp features. In his hands was the welcome tray, glasses of red wine glinting, crisp white wine, and miniature bottles of champagne lined up neatly. Elena raised her eyes, waiting for the exchange of acknowledgement. Peter drifted past her as if she weren't there. He leaned toward the white man in the next seat, lowering a glass with both hands. "Wishing you a wonderful flight, Mr. Grant." Grant, a pharmaceuticals investor, responded with a pleased grin. When Peter reached Elena, he didn't ask what she wanted. He didn't even look at her. He set down a flimsy plastic cup of warm, cloudy water on her tray table with a faint thud. No smile, no greeting. Elena stared at the cup. The window light struck the surface, revealing specks of dust clinging to the sides. All around her, passengers raised gleaming crystal glasses. Before her sat the opposite. A sour silence pressed against her chest, but her expression never flickered. She gave the faintest nod, as if noting it for the record. Her right hand brushed across her smartwatch, discreetly activating the data capture mode of the overhead cameras in the business cabin. It's begun, she thought. No one else in that cabin knew. Elena Torres wasn't just another well-dressed professional. She was a strategic investor in the very airline they were flying, holding a quiet seat on the board. Her reason for investing? She believed in the idea of equal space. In the sky, no one carried their land, no one displayed their homes or fortunes. The ticket itself was the only equalizer. But 20 years of travel had taught her otherwise. She had seen women of color overlooked, made to wait longer, given half-hearted service. She had pushed for cameras in premium cabins, officially under the banner of safety and quality assurance. But in truth, she had always known they would become something more, a mirror that couldn't look away from prejudice. Elena sat straight, eyes scanning. A young French couple across the aisle snapped photos of their wine, posting them instantly to Instagram. A middle-aged blonde flipped through Vogue, glancing at Elena with the unspoken question, "What is she doing here?" Elena smiled. She'd seen that look all her life. Raised in Houston, the daughter of Mexican immigrants, she had learned that silence could be a weapon. Not surrender, but a blade hidden beneath the coat, waiting for the right moment. The service cart rolled down the aisle, wheels squeaking softly, each sound a countdown. Elena glanced again at her email confirmation. Mediterranean vegetarian, confirmed. When her turn came, Peter set down a clear plastic tray, plain white rice and a few limp vegetables. No hot dish. No wine. No apology. I ordered the Mediterranean vegetarian meal, she said evenly. Could you double check? Peter didn't meet her eyes. We're out. This is all that's left. I booked it 3 weeks ago and received confirmation. The system makes mistakes sometimes. You should know that. Cold, dismissive. Then he turned away, immediately lowering his voice to explain wine pairings to the man beside her, placing a gleaming plate of braised short ribs before him. Elena looked at the tray. Broken grains of rice stuck to the sides, like something salvaged from a domestic flight. She lowered her pen to the notebook, writing 7 words. Plastic tray, business class service. A soft cough came from the row behind her. Mr. Nakamura, a Japanese businessman in his 60s who had been quietly reading a newspaper, leaned forward. He peered at her tray, folded his paper, and studied her with narrowed eyes. Excuse me, he asked softly. Is that an economy meal? Elena offered a thin smile. Yes, apparently, it's what they think suits me better. His brows knit. He nodded slowly, saying nothing more, but the look in his eyes told her he understood. Around them, whispers stirred. One young passenger filming his champagne inadvertently captured her plastic tray in the frame. The contrast spoke louder than any words. From behind the curtain, she caught the muffled voices. That type, always complaining. Keep it down, Peter. Someone might hear. So what? She thinks she belongs here? Probably cashed in miles. Not worth wasting the good stuff. Elena tilted her head slightly. Each word fell into her ears like drops of acid, but her face remained untouched, composed. Her finger tapped her watch again. Mark timestamp, audio flagged. She scribbled 2 words in her notebook. Whispers. Evidence. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. Behind the darkness of her eyelids rose the memory of her father, a factory worker fired for standing up to a manager. Her mother, bent over a sink of dishes in the diner, swallowing the insults of entitled customers. Stay quiet, Elena, her mother had once said. Quiet keeps you safe, but Elena had chosen a different silence. Hers wasn't submission. It was the silence of a blade, waiting. The plastic cup of water trembled faintly with the rumble of the engines. Elena opened her eyes, staring at it, then at the crystal glasses gleaming around her. In that instant she knew, this flight would not just be a trip across the Atlantic. It would be a test of the very system she had invested in. The intercom crackled. Captain Doyle's voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. We are preparing for departure. Elena lifted her pen once more and wrote a single line across the page. Take off and the game begins. The aircraft leveled off, the seatbelt sign pinging softly as it dimmed above their heads. Business class loosened its collective shoulders. The low murmur of conversation, the clink of glassware, the comforting rituals of a long-haul flight settling in. Elena straightened the pages of her report, though her eyes weren't on the numbers. She had built an empire on the ability to split her focus, half in the conversation, half in the silent currents beneath it. Tonight was no different. She scanned balance sheets while listening to every shift in the cabin around her. 10 minutes passed. Passengers who had boarded after her were already swirling wine in crystal glasses. She still had only the plastic cup of warm water, condensation pooling at its base like a quiet insult. She pressed the call button. Her finger lingered on the plastic, then pressed down with measured certainty. The chime cut through the cabin. Heads turned briefly, then returned to their magazines. Peter appeared. His smile had thinned. Yes, ma'am? I believe I'm still waiting for the pre-departure beverage I requested, Elena said, her voice professional, not an inch above neutral. I booked this ticket with a confirmed Merlot pairing. He glanced toward the galley, then back at her. Not seeing that in our system. We're running low on premium beverages for this flight. I can offer orange juice or water. Elena's eyes shifted past him. The bar cart gleamed, bottles lined like soldiers awaiting inspection. That's unusual, she said, opening her tablet to the email confirmation. The screen glowed with the airline's logo. Perhaps you could double-check. Peter's jaw tightened. As I mentioned, we have limited stock. The system sometimes overbooks certain items. He forced a smile that never touched his eyes. I'll bring you some orange juice. Before she could respond, he turned and left, his shoes clipping against the carpet. A second attendant glanced back at her, smirking before ducking behind the curtain. Elena sat perfectly still. Anger was a luxury she couldn't afford. She reached for her notebook instead, jotting down the exchange in clean, precise script. Evidence built brick by brick, not in outbursts but in records. She tapped her smartwatch. Message: experiencing some interesting service discrepancies on Flight 447. Might be nothing. Note to discuss with HR upon return. The captain's voice interrupted over the intercom, smooth and professional, thanking passengers for choosing the airline. Elena returned her seat upright, storing her tablet. As the engines roared and the aircraft cut through cloud cover, she folded her hands in her lap. Her silence was heavier now, a weight settling over the entire row. Service resumed. Warm nuts in porcelain bowls for her neighbors. A silver-haired gentleman across the aisle received his pre-ordered champagne with a flourish. When the tray reached her, Peter set down a sealed packet of pretzels, the kind usually tossed into economy cabins, without meeting her eyes. Elena studied the packet, its crinkled foil reflecting the soft cabin lights. Pretzels, in business class. She logged it in her notes, the pen scratching steadily. The plane hummed onward, the quiet conversations of other passengers now carrying an edge. People noticed. Not everyone looked at her directly, but she could feel the awareness drifting like a breeze across the cabin. She opened her messaging app again. On second thought, please contact HR immediately. Ask if minority passengers in premium cabins have filed recent complaints. And remind me, when did we install the surveillance system across the fleet? The reply came quickly. System went live 3 months ago. All footage stored for 30 days. 17 formal complaints filed over the past year. 5 involving this attendant, Claire Wilson. Elena read the message twice, then slipped the tablet back into her jacket pocket. The evidence was no longer isolated. It was a pattern, woven into the fabric of the airline she partly owned. The meal cart rattled forward. Silver domes lifted with elegant timing, revealing salmon over truffle risotto, wine pairings described with reverence. Laughter followed each presentation. The air smelled of butter and herbs. When her turn came, Peter's professional smile dropped. He set a tray before her with a curt, "Your meal, no dome." No flourish. Elena lifted the cover. A dry sandwich sat on stale bread, edges curling like paper left in the sun. Beside it, a cup of lukewarm apple juice. The contrast was undeniable. Curious glances flickered from nearby seats. "Excuse me," Elena said, calm but firm. "I believe there's been a mistake. I pre-ordered the chef's vegetarian special." Peter didn't flinch. "We don't have any record of that. We're serving what's available." Elena turned her tablet screen toward him, the glowing confirmation clear. "Your system acknowledged my order. Perhaps you could check again." He barely glanced. "Our system sometimes overbooks. There isn't enough premium service to go around." She gestured discreetly to the passengers around her, each dining on gourmet plates. "And yet I seem to be the only one affected." Peter's smile thinned further. "We have to prioritize certain guests based on status and loyalty standing. I'm a Platinum Elite member," Elena replied evenly. Over 200,000 miles flown last year. I'll check with my supervisor, he said, his tone making clear he had no intention of doing so. Then he vanished behind the curtain. Elena stared at the sandwich. She didn't touch it. She pressed the call button again. This time, another attendant approached, Michael, younger, his badge polished bright. His tone carried that particular edge, halfway between forced courtesy and irritation. Yes? I'd like to speak with the purser, Elena said. Regarding an issue with my meal service. Clara's handling this section, Michael replied, his brows drawing together. What seems to be the problem? I pre-ordered a meal that wasn't delivered. I was given what appears to be an economy class option instead. I was told certain passengers were prioritized. Despite my platinum status, sometimes we have to make service adjustments mid-flight, Michael said. His voice had a patronizing tilt. I'm sure Claire explained. We can't accommodate every request. Elena lifted the sandwich, its edges curling further as it dried. What I don't understand is why everyone else received what they ordered while I received this. Perhaps you could explain the criteria for these adjustments. His posture stiffened. Sir, he stopped, correcting himself clumsily. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. You're disturbing other passengers. Elena hadn't raised her voice at all. She noted the irony. The only disturbance was the injustice echoing through the cabin. Her tone remained calm, unshaken. I am simply asking for an explanation. Michael's eyes narrowed. Behind him, the curtain shifted. She caught a glimpse of Peter whispering to Claire, their heads bent close, their eyes darting toward her. Elena reached for her phone again. She began drafting a message to HR, detailing the situation. A shadow fell across her tray. The silver-haired man across the aisle, Mr. Nakamura, stood with his half-finished plate of salmon in hand. He lowered his voice. I've been flying this route for 15 years, he said. Never seen anything like this. It isn't right. Would you like me to say something? Elena met his eyes and gave a small, appreciative shake of the head. Thank you. I can handle it, he nodded, returning to his seat. But his presence lingered, a quiet ally in a room that suddenly felt hostile. Elena set her phone down and lifted the sandwich. The top slice revealed green flecks spreading across the bread. Mold, dark spots mottled the underside. Her instincts had whispered it already. Now the proof sat on her tray, undeniable. She replaced the bread, pushing the plate away. Her appetite disappeared. Michael returned, his voice carrying a mocking edge that nearby passengers could hear. Everything all right with your meal, ma'am? No, Elena said evenly, gesturing to the plate. There's visible mold on this bread. I'd like to speak with the captain. He leaned closer, scrutinizing the sandwich with exaggerated disbelief. I don't see anything unusual. Perhaps you're mistaken. I assure you I'm not, Elena replied, her composure steady despite the provocation. This bread is spoiled. And I'd like to know why I was served it while others received fresh meals. Peter reappeared beside him, his irritation barely concealed. Is there a problem here again? Yes, Elena answered, her voice still calm. I've been served moldy bread while others enjoy proper meals. I've asked repeatedly for an explanation and received only excuses. Peter's eyes narrowed, a flash of something darker cutting through his mask. If you don't like what we've served, you don't have to eat it. But I will not have you disrupting this flight with baseless accusations. Baseless? Elena echoed softly. She gestured to the sandwich. The evidence is right here. Maybe because some people don't know how to be grateful for what they're given. Peter muttered, low but audible to nearby passengers. Always wanting special treatment. The words hung heavy in the cabin. A silence followed, sharper than any outburst. Elena kept her pulse steady. Years of navigating such moments had trained her not to flinch. I don't want special treatment, she said clearly. I want equal treatment. The same meal options, the same service, The same respect as every other passenger in this cabin. Peter leaned closer, lowering his voice but not enough. I don't know how you got into this cabin, but we both know you don't belong here. Why don't you sit quietly and be thankful you're not back in coach? Enough, Michael interrupted suddenly, glancing around at the passengers who had angled their phones toward the scene. Let's discuss this in the galley. They retreated behind the curtain, voices rising despite the effort to muffle them. Elena sat back, her expression calm, though inside her resolve crystallized. The prejudice was no longer subtle. It had surfaced, undeniable. In front of witnesses and under the silent gaze of cameras, her hand hovered over the phone screen. She considered alerting HR immediately. But she let the moment breathe. Evidence was strongest when it revealed itself fully, without interference. The cabin shifted around her. Passengers exchanged glances, whispers fluttering through the air. The weight of silence had changed sides. Elena opened her notebook again. She wrote one word across the page in neat, decisive letters: escalation. The galley curtain quivered with every sharp syllable. The hiss of voices leaked into the cabin, despite the crew's effort to contain them. Elena sat perfectly still, her fingers resting on the closed notebook. Around her, passengers fidgeted, trying to look occupied but glancing toward the curtain as though it were a stage where an unseen drama played. Minutes passed before the curtain snapped open. Captain Doyle emerged, his shoulders filling the aisle, his crisp uniform radiating authority. He walked with deliberate gravity, the way a man does when he expects obedience before he even speaks. His gaze found Elena, and the corners of his mouth flattened. Mrs. Torres, he said, voice low but carrying. I've been informed there's a situation. Elena looked up, unhurried, her expression calm. There is. I was served spoiled food after being repeatedly denied the meal I booked. When I asked for an explanation, I was told I don't belong in this cabin. A flicker of something crossed Doyle's face, surprise, annoyance, calculation, but it was gone before most could read it. I understand you've been disturbing the other passengers, he said. I'll need you to lower your voice and comply with crew instructions. Elena's tone didn't waver. What instruction have I failed to follow? You've questioned service procedures, refused the meal offered to you, and created tension in this cabin. My crew reports you've been disruptive. I haven't raised my voice once, Elena replied. I haven't refused safety instructions. I've simply asked for the service I paid for, the same as every passenger here. She gestured quietly to the rows of white china, wine glasses, and contented diners around her. That's not disruption. That's accountability. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. A woman across the aisle set down her fork, watching openly now. Someone's phone camera hovered higher, unhidden. The captain's jaw tightened. Mrs. Torres, let me be clear. As commander of this aircraft, my determination of what constitutes a disturbance is final. If this behavior continues, I'll be forced to divert the flight for the safety of all on board. The words landed like a dropped gavel. Gasps, whispers, nervous shifting. Diverting a flight was no small threat. It meant hours of delay, missed connections, chaos. Elena's pulse quickened, but her voice remained composed. Captain, before you escalate this further, you should know something. Every premium cabin across this fleet has been equipped with surveillance cameras for the past 3 months. Every word spoken in this cabin, including behind that curtain, has been recorded and stored on secure servers. The color drained from Doyle's face. Just a shade, but enough for Elena to see. Behind him, Peter stiffened. Michael's eyes darted toward the ceiling panels as if suddenly realizing the small, glassy domes weren't decoration. Elena continued, her voice low but clear. So when you say you're relying on your crew's reports, understand that independent evidence exists. Evidence that shows I was served moldy food while being told I don't belong in this cabin. Evidence that will outlast any narrative spun in this moment. For the first time, Doyle hesitated. His gaze flickered across the rows of passengers, phones still angled, witnesses unblinking. Authority that once seemed unassailable now trembled on a knife's edge. "Mrs. Torres," he said finally, his voice harder, sharper, as though volume could restore what logic had eroded. "You need to stop this now. You're undermining my crew and endangering order on this flight. Last warning, order?" Elena leaned forward slightly, her hands folded, her words surgical. "Order is not preserved by silencing a paying passenger who asks for equal treatment. Order is not preserved by serving moldy food and then gaslighting the customer who received it. Order is preserved when truth is acknowledged and wrongs are corrected." The silver-haired Mr. Nakamura stood again, steadying himself against the seat. His voice, though quiet, carried with unexpected force. "Captain, I have witnessed everything. This woman has been calm, respectful, and patient. She has been mistreated at every step. If you divert this flight, you will do so not for safety, but to punish someone for demanding dignity." Other voices followed, tentative at first, then stronger. "She's right. She hasn't disturbed anyone. I've been recording since the meal. Service everything she says is true." Phones tilted higher, a dozen lenses now aimed at the aisle. Doyle's authority sagged under the collective gaze. He inhaled through his nose, his mouth tightening as though bracing for impact. From behind the curtain came Claire's voice, brittle and breaking. "He probably used points or some diversity program to get here. Did you see how she's dressed? Acting like she owns the place." The words sliced through the cabin. Several passengers gasped audibly. The curtain fluttered as Claire realized too late that her voice had carried. Elena didn't move. She let the silence hang, heavier with each second. Then she said softly, "And there it is." Her hand slid across the tablet on her tray. She opened the secure app, her fingers deliberate. With 3 taps, she sent a message directly to the board of directors. Subject, urgent, Flight 447 incident. Request, immediate review of cabin surveillance footage. Documented discrimination, live escalation in progress. Recommend full intervention. The message sent with a quiet chime that seemed to echo through the hush. Doyle's face hardened. "You planned this," he hissed under his breath. "Came onto my aircraft looking for trouble. I boarded this plane," Elena said evenly, "expecting what everyone expects, the service I paid for, and the dignity of being treated as a customer, not an intruder. Everything since has been a result of choices your crew made." Her words hung in the charged air. Around them, passengers remained utterly still, suspended in the tension of a moment that had shifted from personal slight to public reckoning. The captain glanced toward the cockpit, perhaps calculating whether to force the diversion anyway. His authority trembled, his instincts telling him one thing, the weight of evidence and witnesses telling him another. Elena's gaze never left. His calm, unyielding dot for the first time in his long career. Captain Doyle found himself unable to simply command obedience. And the cabin, every eye fixed on the confrontation, waited for what he would do next. The captain's silence stretched too long. In the pressurized stillness of the cabin, every second without a response felt like an admission. He finally muttered something about safety and turned sharply, striding back toward the cockpit. The curtain snapped behind him, but it didn't seal the rupture. The cabin remained tense, passengers whispering in low bursts. Phones glowed in the dimmed lights, messages fired off into the digital ether. What had started as a moldy sandwich was now spreading beyond the fuselage. One post, one recording at a time. Elena exhaled slowly, sliding her tablet back into her bag. Her eyes closed briefly, but not in fatigue. In calculation. Then her smartwatch vibrated. A secure ping. She raised her wrist. Message from Jessica. Surveillance system confirmed active. HR and legal reviewing footage right now. Team mobilizing at Denver International. You will not be alone when you land. Elena let the words sink in. Denver. They were really going to divert. The announcement came minutes later. Doyle's voice over the intercom, tight and brittle. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've identified a technical concern and will be diverting to Denver International Airport for precautionary reasons. We apologize for the inconvenience and expect to resume to New York shortly after." A murmur of frustration swept the cabin. A businessman muttered about missed meetings. A couple fretted about their connection to Tokyo. Passengers shifted. Annoyed, restless. Elena sat still, her pulse steady. The lie was transparent. Technical concern. She almost smiled at the predictability of it. The descent was sharper than usual, the engines pulling back as the Rockies came into view below. Lights glittered on the dark earth, a frozen grid waiting to receive them. The wheels struck the runway with a thud, the reversers roaring as the plane decelerated. Then came the command that froze the cabin in a new kind of silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated until further notice. Security procedures require your cooperation." The words landed like shackles. But the door didn't open to TSA officers or armed police. It opened to three figures in tailored suits and executive uniforms. Their presence carried a different weight. Corporate authority sharpened by legal teeth. At their center was Diane Chun, head of HR, her stride clipped and certain. She stepped into the business cabin with the poise of someone used to dealing with corporate fires and extinguishing them. "Captain Doyle," she said, her voice carrying through the stunned cabin. "There will be no need for security. Please gather your crew and step aside." Doyle blinked, caught mid-motion in the aisle. His expression collapsed into disbelief. "Excuse me? I'm the commander of this aircraft." Not anymore," Diane interrupted, her tone crisp as shattered glass. "You and your crew are relieved of duty, effective immediately, pending investigation." She turned, inclining her head toward Elena with professional respect. "Mrs. Torres, on behalf of the airline, I want to extend my apologies for what you've endured." The air shifted instantly. Whispers burst like sparks across the rows. Passengers craned to see, to record. Doyle's authority had been stripped bare. His role dissolved in a single sentence. One of the executives stepped forward, his voice firm but calm. "A replacement crew is boarding now. This flight will continue to New York under new command." The captain's jaw worked silently. His eyes darted to Elena, suddenly searching, as if piecing together who exactly he had been sparring with. The answer was written across Diane's body language, across the calm deference of the executives. "This wasn't just any passenger. Who are you?" Doyle whispered, but the question held no power anymore. Elena met his gaze evenly. "Someone who believed your airline could do better. Someone who still does." Passengers stared, their silence no longer complicit, but charged with recognition. Behind Doyle, Peter and Michael hovered at the galley's edge, their faces pale, eyes flicking between the executives and the passengers' recording phones. Claire Wilson stood stiff, her lips pressed into a thin line that trembled at the edges. Diane turned to them. "Gather your belongings. Your credentials are suspended pending review of the surveillance footage." Claire burst forward, indignation cracking her voice. "This is ridiculous. That woman twisted everything. She's manipulating you." Diane held up a tablet. With a tap, the screen bloomed to life, playing back footage, Claire's voice whispering, unmistakable. "She doesn't belong here. Probably used points. These people need to learn their place." The sound filled the cabin. Gasps rippled across the rows. The truth was out, undeniable, echoing through the very space where the words had first been spoken. Claire's mouth fell open. Her face drained of color. She glanced upward, toward the discreet camera domes she'd never noticed until this moment. "This is an invasion of privacy," she shouted weakly. Diane didn't blink. "Page 17 of your employment contract. Page 4 of the handbook. Mandatory training you signed. All crew were informed 3 months ago that premium cabins are monitored. The words landed like a verdict. Elena sat still, her pen resting lightly on the open notebook. She didn't need to add anything. The record was already written, not just in ink, but in pixels and sound waves, in the memory of every witness in the cabin. Passengers exhaled as though surfacing from deep water. The tension that had held them taut for hours snapped at once, replaced by a buzz of conversation, by the rapid tap of fingers on phones. Posts would already be traveling across time zones, hashtags blooming before the aircraft had even shut down its engines. The curtain at the rear opened, and new crew members began filing in, faces fresh, expressions sober, eyes scanning as though already aware of the scandal they were stepping into. Doyle lingered, shoulders rigid, his authority crumbling in real time. Diane's words had stripped him bare, but the real wound was the presence of dozens of witnesses, each one holding a digital mirror to reflect his downfall. "Captain," Diane said, her voice final. "Please deplane, now." His jaw clenched, but he turned, marching stiffly toward the exit. Claire and Michael followed, casting fleeting glances at Elena, half venom, half disbelief, before disappearing down the jetway. For the first time since the plane had left London, Elena allowed herself to exhale fully. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just release. She looked around the cabin, at the faces still watching her, waiting. And she understood. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. The hum of the air conditioning filled the silence left behind by Doyle and his crew. Their absence was a vacuum, and every passenger felt it. A flight once ordinary now carried the weight of history. An unease laced with anticipation. The replacement captain, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like polished steel, stepped into the first-class cabin. She introduced herself briskly, her voice calm, authoritative without the arrogance. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Captain Lindstrom. My crew and I will be taking you to New York. We appreciate your patience." Applause broke out, scattered at first, then gathering strength as passengers released some of the tension that had gripped them. Relief spread through the rows. But their eyes kept drifting back to Elena. Diane appeared beside her seat. "Mrs. Torres," she said, voice pitched low. "The passengers deserve to hear it from you. Would you be willing?" Elena closed her notebook, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of her lips. She understood what Diane was asking. Not a corporate statement. Not legal jargon. Something human. She rose, smoothing the front of her blazer, and walked to the front of the cabin. The hush returned instantly, conversations evaporating. Even in economy, heads turned. Necks craned. Elena accepted the intercom handset from Diane. She took a slow breath and began. "My name is Elena Torres," she said, her voice steady, resonant. "I want to explain why your flight was interrupted today." The cabin leaned in. "Earlier, I requested the meal I had pre-ordered. Instead, I was given spoiled food, dismissed when I asked for what I had paid for, and told explicitly that I don't belong in this cabin. When I questioned this treatment, I was labeled disruptive. The captain diverted the flight, not because of any safety concern, but to remove me for daring to ask for equal treatment." Gasps rippled. Disbelief etched across faces in both cabins. "What the crew didn't know," Elena continued, her tone calm but firm, "is that I am not only a passenger. I am also a partner in this airline. 3 years ago, I invested in this company because I believed we could build something better. As part of that, I implemented surveillance in premium cabins to ensure this was fair and consistent. That system has recorded every interaction that took place here, today including the comments you overheard behind the curtain." A stunned silence fell. People exchanged glances, realization dawning. "That footage is already in the hands of HR and legal," Elena said. "And the crew responsible have been removed from duty. But this is not just about one flight. This is about a pattern: 17 complaints in the past year alone, many ignored or dismissed. What happened to me today has happened to others. And it stops here. The hush thickened, but the silence now was reverent, almost electric. Elena's voice softened. I also know this diversion has disrupted your lives, meetings missed, connections broken, families delayed. For that I apologize. And because inconvenience should never fall on the innocent, every passenger on this aircraft will receive a full refund, $10,000 in compensation, and 5 years of complimentary elite status. The cabin erupted. Disbelief gave way to applause, cheers, even laughter of relief. In economy, a young father lifted his toddler into the air as though she'd just been told she could go to college. In first, even the most jaded executives clapped. The ovation rolled down the fuselage like a wave. Elena let it crest before she spoke again. But understand, this isn't about money. It's about what happens when injustice goes unchallenged. When someone is told they don't belong and everyone looks away, it poisons the air for all of us. Today, you all witnessed it. And today, you all witnessed accountability. She handed the intercom back to Diane and stepped aside. But passengers didn't retreat into their silence. They leaned into the aisles, clapping her shoulder as she walked back, murmuring thanks, sharing their own stories in hurried whispers. A young black woman from economy paused at her seat, tears shining in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Most of us can't fight back the way you can. Elena touched her hand lightly, humbled. That's why I had to. Back in her seat, the ovation still echoing faintly, Elena opened her notebook again. Not to write about the humiliation or the confrontation, but to capture this moment, the shift in air, the collective realization that silence had been broken at 30,000 feet. Outside the window, the Denver lights twinkled, cold and clear. Soon they would lift again, the aircraft climbing back into the night sky. But the flight was no longer just a journey across miles. It had become something larger, a reckoning that could not be contained to one cabin, one plane, or even one airline. And Elena knew, with the clarity of someone who had fought battles before, that this was only the beginning. When the jet finally touched down at JFK, dawn was bleeding across the horizon. The passengers, weary but strangely energized, filed out under the watchful eyes of a new crew who had handled the remainder of the flight with impeccable precision. Elena lingered near the front, waiting as others deplaned. Some shook her hand, some whispered quiet gratitude, others simply nodded with a kind of reverence. She accepted it all with calm, though inside, a heaviness pressed at her chest. Victory never came without weight. At the gate, Diane Chun and a cluster of executives were waiting. Behind them, airport officials loitered in the background, but they weren't needed. This was not a security incident. It was corporate. And Elena was no longer just a passenger. Mrs. Torres, Diane said, her voice carrying both relief and urgency. The footage has been fully secured. The chairman's called an emergency board meeting for 8 o'clock. Elena nodded, unsurprised. Good, that's where this belongs. They moved through the executive terminal quickly, where a makeshift command center had already been established. Screens lit up with live feeds, customer metrics, trending hashtags, cable news headlines flashing airline diverts flight amid racism allegations. The story had already slipped its leash, racing ahead across time zones. A young analyst pointed to one of the dashboards. Mentions are up 600% in the last hour. Engagements climbing every minute. And sentiment? Elena asked. The analyst hesitated. Mixed. Outrage at the crew. Sympathy for you. But also disbelief. Some think it's exaggerated. Elena's jaw tightened. Then we show them the evidence. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she reviewed every transcript, every frame of footage, every past complaint Diane's team had unearthed. 78 cases over 3 years. 78 dismissed, minimized, or quietly settled. Her pulse quickened as she read. This was an anomaly. It was rot. By morning, She walked into the boardroom of Elite Airways not just with a dossier, but with conviction burning like steel beneath her skin. The room was polished oak and glass, the air faintly scented with coffee and expensive perfume. Executives filled their seats, faces drawn from lack of sleep, nerves buzzing with the knowledge that the world outside was watching. Robert Chun, the chairman, gestured for Elena to begin. She didn't waste time. She connected her tablet to the screen, and Claire's recorded words filled the boardroom. She doesn't belong here. These people need to learn their place. The board members shifted, uncomfortably as the recording played on Michael's dismissal, Doyle's cold threats, the entire descent into hostility. When the footage ended, Elena let the silence linger. Then she said, her voice steady, "This wasn't poor service. This was systemic discrimination, cultivated by a culture that excuses, minimizes, and denies. We've dismissed complaints, ignored warning signs, and allowed our brand to be associated with humiliation instead of dignity." Some of the board members bristled. One, Charles Whitfield, leaned forward, frowning. "No one is defending what happened, Elena, but $10 million in compensation for a single diversion? That's excessive." Elena's gaze pinned him. "Excessive. Our passengers have smartphones, Charles. Do you know how many clips are already online? Do you know what one viral video costs in lawsuits, boycotts, lost contracts? 10 million is an investment in survival." Another director, Victoria Hayes, frowned at the reform package stacked in binders before them. "Your proposals: new training, independent review committees, expansion of surveillance, it's millions more. Consider the alternative," Elena countered. "Class action lawsuits, federal investigations, empty planes." She leaned forward, her tone hardening. "We can't afford to treat this as isolated misconduct. 78 similar complaints dismissed in 3 years. That's not isolated. That's systemic. And the system needs to change." The debate raged for hours, some clinging to old excuses, others already convinced. But Elena didn't yield. Every time resistance rose, she pressed it back with evidence, with logic, with the sheer moral weight of what they had all seen. By noon, the vote came. 11 in favor, 3 opposed. The reforms passed. When the board adjourned, Robert Chun approached her. "It won't be easy," he said quietly. "Some of them will fight you, drag their feet. But you've forced the issue. And for that, you have my full support." Elena nodded, though her expression was sober. This was never about ease. It was about necessity. 6 months later, the transformation was visible. Training programs had been overhauled. Complaints were investigated by a diverse, independent panel. Surveillance had expanded to all cabins, deterring misconduct and documenting service with clarity, and most telling of all, customers noticed. Bookings were up. Loyalty had risen. The scandal had not destroyed Elite Airways. It had rebuilt it. Elena boarded a flight from San Francisco to New York one crisp autumn morning. Seat 2A, the same place where it had all begun. A flight attendant approached, her smile genuine, her tone warm. "Good morning, Mrs. Torres. We've noted your pre-ordered meal and beverage. May I bring you anything else before takeoff?" Elena shook her head softly. "Just the towel, thank you." As the woman moved on, she placed a sealed envelope on Elena's tray. Inside was a handwritten note, signed by the entire crew. "Your courage 6 months ago changed this airline. Thank you for ensuring every passenger truly receives first-class treatment." Elena folded the note carefully, sliding it into her notebook. She looked out the window as the plane taxied down the runway. 6 months ago, she had been told she didn't belong. Now the very system had shifted to ensure belonging was no longer a privilege granted, but a right recognized. The engines roared. The plane lifted into the sky. For the first time in years, Elena allowed herself a small, unguarded smile. Not triumph. Not vindication. Just the quiet pleasure of being treated. Finally, simply, as a passenger, when the plane finally touched down, it wasn't about a spoiled meal anymore. It was about dignity, accountability, and the power of refusing to stay silent. Because change doesn't begin in boardrooms, it begins in moments like these, when one person stands firm, and others find the courage to stand with them, and maybe, just maybe, that's the real first-class service. A world where every passenger, every person, is treated with respect. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story moved you, I'd love for you to subscribe and stay with us, because there are many more stories waiting to be told, and together we'll make sure they're never forgotten.